So with this, the dispensaries opening in Colorado this week, it sort of reopened the national debate about legalization of marijuana. A lot of national sort of opinion leaders weighed in, and I think the column that got the most attention this week was from David Brooks in the New York Times, and he was against it. But just to play a clip of it here, read a clip of it, he said, in healthy societies, government wants to subtly tip the scale to favor temperate, prudent, self-governing citizenship. In those societies, government subtly encourages the highest pleasures, like enjoying the arts or being in nature, and discouraging lesser pleasures like being stoned. And so he was basically saying, at the start of this column, he kind of admits, he says, in my earlier years, me and my friends would smoke marijuana, but he just sort of discovered it wasn't compatible with what he sees as sort of responsible, mature adulthood. I know the argument got mocked, a lot, but I mean, there is something to that, though, in general, right? About we do have a whole series of laws in this country that are sort of designed to say, well, we don't want people using crack cocaine. We don't want people. So there is something to the argument, isn't there, Liz?
Well, I think that, as many David Brooks columns prove, David Brooks takes his life and then purports it to be everyone's experience. And being someone who works in the arts and having there be an either-or thing, I would say
Right.
that is ridiculous. And I think that it's ridiculous also for David Brooks. It shows his privilege, and his privilege should be checked in this article by saying, I was able to just put it down and do this and that and the other thing, and I outgrew it and all of this stuff. And it's like, you want to know what? Lucky you, then. You can't make both ways. It can be a gateway, or it can. I was lucky enough to.
I think David would
privilege.
benefit from a quick junket and a junket to the Netherlands, a stop at a coffee shop, and the Van Gogh Museum, and see what he says after.
Yeah,
Well, but the issue, the issue that I think you're raising there is, there's sort of it gets into the class system in this country, where if you kind of grow up privileged in this country, chances are you can have your years of experimentation with marijuana or whatever, and you're probably not going to get caught. You're probably going to be able to look back like David Brooks does in his column. But if you look at, we have two graphs here that are pretty telling. This is the use of marijuana by race, and you see it's basically even. Now look at this, marijuana arrests. And you can see that when you look at the arrest rate, it's just, I mean, you look at it. So, I guess, Jeffrey, that's one of the questions that's raised here by the idea of keeping this illegal. You're also sort of supporting and propping up this system that's been grossly unfair, hasn't it, in terms of who ends up paying the price for this?
Yeah, and look, as a treatment professional, we've never advocated incarceration as the solution to what we now know as a brain disease, and clearly we have a long way to go. When it comes to marijuana, it's a trickier question because there aren't good service structures in place to educate people about marijuana use. So it's almost like if you're an OxyContin or a Vicodin user, you go off to treatment, and other than that, we kind of leave you alone. We need something in the middle that says to the chronic marijuana user who's 17, who's smoking every day, right? That person won't necessarily qualify for treatment, but that person needs something.
Yeah,
because without intervention, they're going to run into some life problems. So I would say, we should be reinvesting into the treatment system, take all the money we're wasting on incarcerating young black men and put that into the treatment system. That's one of the things that I think we all agree upon, to say, look, the war on drugs has been a failure. The law enforcement response to a public health problem is inappropriate and wasteful. How at this point, though, do we begin to reprogram some of those dollars into a system that provides support and care for young people who are struggling?
So, I mean, is your idea, because I'm just trying to piece together what it would look like, somebody who still wants marijuana to be illegal, doesn't want to see people getting arrested, doesn't want to see their records for life ruined by this. Are you saying, like, you pay a civil fine, you have mandatory
civil fines and
treatment?
education? Look, civil fines and education. There was a mindset years ago that mandatory treatment didn't work. Well, it does. We now know that it does. And it's not even so much treatment, it's education. We've got a program where we take young people who get jammed up on low-level marijuana charges and educate them about marijuana use and do some goal setting with them. It's not treatment per se, but it's some intervention along the way where someone taps them on the shoulder and says, look, this is kind of the road you're on. Is this really the road you want to be on? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. Not enough community support for those folks who want to make some different choices. So, and as the economy has tightened up, those kind of services in communities are less and less and less. So I worry about, let's run towards legalization, let's kind of lift the ban on this without having some support in place for young people who struggle.
You know, much like alcohol, what support systems do we have in place for 17-year-olds who are drinking every weekend?
Not enough.
I agree.
Right.
And I think that it's great that all of us, and I'm sure David Brooks would agree, that incarceration is not a viable option, that treatment should be available. I enjoyed the David Brooks piece. It took me about 3 reads before I realized it wasn't by The Onion, in putting that no one's ever proud of anything they did on marijuana. I think when McCartney hears Sgt. Pepper's, he feels a surge of pride, quite frankly. But I do think that, you know, David Brooks doesn't offer any other solutions. And one of the greatest critiques of the Obama administration in the first term was that the single greatest broken promise was that they would not interfere with the California dispensaries. And of course, we know the DOJ did exactly the opposite. So considering that we haven't heard this president yet use the words prison industrial complex, I think that graphs like the one you just showed show the inherent morality in not locking people up for what is essentially
while at the same time,
crime.
this president has taken the foot off the gas on the drug war and marijuana more than any president.
Indeed he has.
And much to the chagrin of some, but there's no doubt that he is the most progressive president on cannabis since Carter.
Well, and we'll pick that point up after the break about where the politics of this are going at the federal level, and in some interesting state developments. We'll pick that up and play a clip from Obama on this subject right after this.